Well, welcome everybody to the Bridges and Tables podcast 2.0. It's been a while since I've had an installment of this, so just thanks for jumping back in. Here's my friend and brother, Moses. Great to have you on, and I think this is going to be more of a consistent thing as far as I think I've been waiting to really have a good co-host, and I've just been so thankful to be able to get to know you and really just to be able to get to know your story, and maybe we could just kind of tell people maybe how we met, and that could be a helpful start to the podcast.
Yeah, it's definitely been a blessing to know you, and I would say our how we met is just by God's timing, God's work. So all praise to God, and I really appreciate like everything that you have done for me and for my wife Pusida, and I met you and your family because of Pusida. So and just from the time that I've known you, we've had a lot of conversations. We've gotten to know each other a lot, and this is just kind of an outpouring of our passions and things that we've been convicted by the Lord, and so I'm glad that this is where we are today, and the Lord, we will allow God to use us and to see what comes out of this podcast. And I know you've been working on it before too, so if you could just share a little bit about that and how you started it and how you envision it from this point on.
Yeah, thank you for that. I can't remember when my first episode came out. It was with Pastor Santosh Sharma from the Nepali community in the Nepali church that he leads, second generations. So we started out with him, and then we went to Haley Wiggers, who's a connections pastor or young adults pastor, I forget which of the two. But it was really, the Bridges and Tables podcast started out as kind of a outpouring from just a kind of compulsion and passion, conviction that I had to see people from different walks of life intersect in the form of just a conversation. And even if we shared maybe, like in the case of Haley and I, similar American culture and story in terms of that there were some other, I think, nuances that I think were really good to bring up in conversation with her. But I really wanted kind of the overall vision for Bridges and Tables was to create a table and a bridge between stories. And as a good friend of mine, says a lot that stories are bridges between worlds. Stories are bridges between worlds. And so when we're allowed to make space for that, I think that can be a really powerful thing, and something that I feel like a podcast in some ways allows you to do that in a unique way. And even if you're just a fly on the wall, listening, maybe it can give you maybe inspiration to do something similar in your own life. Whether it doesn't have to be making up your own podcast, but it could be having a conversation with maybe a coworker or a stranger or somebody that is just an acquaintance to you, maybe a neighbor in your neighborhood, but for whatever reason, maybe there are barriers that have been holding you back to getting to know them and their storyline. And especially as the city of Sioux Falls has seemed to me like it's just gone through such a growth spurt in terms of its diversity and people moving in from outside of the state over the past 10, 15 years for sure. I had spent 10 years living in Ohio before moving back here about 4 or 5 years ago. The Bridges and Tables podcast will kind of remain true to that in a lot of ways, in kind of both of our common mission and vision here that we have for it. But also, I think we also want to see maybe some, and this is kind of going, maybe we'll dive into this a little deeper here in the conversation too, but ways that we want to see not just people coming from different backgrounds together to share a story, but also maybe sharing some ways that we want to see the church bridge gaps in our city and the region in ways that help the church go into places that maybe traditionally, at least maybe in the prevailing models of church, maybe we don't see as much as engagement and gospel engagement, I should say, and to highlight others that are doing a really good work in the community that we maybe feel like are a little more hidden, but also maybe even giving a prophetic call to the church to go into other spaces too that aren't being as engaged. So anyway, that's kind of part of what I'd say about it.
Yeah. And if I could add anything to that, I would say through your work, even beginning the podcast with Santosh and Haley, and even throughout, there's a period where you didn't release a lot, but through that, you've been building all these relationships with a lot of people in the community, from the church community, just from the broader community, CFOS. You've been building all these relationships, and that's how I've gotten to meet you too, and you would support me. We were Facebook friends for a while, and every time I post something, you would just like it and share it, and I'm like, who is this guy? And then luckily I got to meet your wife through Pusida, and then I was like, I know Carl Olsen on Facebook, and she was like, what? That's my husband, and he works for Avera, and then I was like, I work for Avera too, and then I reached out to you on Facebook, and I was like, you've been liking a lot of my posts, and I don't know you in person, but I would like to meet for coffee, and we've been meeting at Caribou Coffee for almost 2 years now, and this is, and what I want to say is just how you build these relationships, and now we're here, and that's what we're hoping to do, because in the kingdom of God, it's all about relationships, and God is a relational God, and the main key in terms of this podcast is, even in the church or even in the community, how can we build on this relationship in a way that God builds his relationships, in a way that Jesus builds his relationships. It's deeper than just getting to know somebody and saying hi. It's living with them and seeing the struggles, or supporting them and cheering them on. And this is what Jesus did through his disciples too. He gotten to know them deeper. He's gotten to support them. He's gotten to, he's gotten to cry with them too. So this is how we can live incarnational with our community. And the podcast is just how we can share Jesus' word and how he lives and how he wants us to live. It's just sharing the word, but the real work is behind what's being said, is how we walk through it with our life. So I really appreciate how you do that in your own life, and that's what I'm trying to learn and trying to do, and be better disciple of Jesus. And this podcast is calling all of our Christian brothers and sisters to come closer to God and build this relationship and build His kingdom. So and I'm hoping that we'll continue to do this. And there's a lot of people that the salvation story has been shared in a million ways. The salvation story has been going on for thousands of years, and we're not trying to create a new way of doing things, but it's just how Jesus does it and how we can best do it.
Yeah, I like how you say that. Kind of how can we, as the church, should always be constantly contextualizing the gospel according to the time and place that we live in. How can we always be reforming the church? And I'm not necessarily a reformed guy here, but just the idea of how can we return to some of those ancient ways and those forgotten ways. If I can borrow a nod from a missional thought leader, Alan Hirsch. But how do we help the church to maybe go through some paradigm shifts, which I really feel like the church is kind of, globally, but for sure here in the West, is going through some paradigm shifts in terms of how to understand maybe its orientation to the culture, and how to its place in the world, and how do we engage the places where we live, work, learn, and play in ways that are full of compassion and conviction. So yeah, I think that's
Yeah.
really good. And I have a lot of people that I feel like I have added on Facebook as friends without really having met them. That was like a pattern of mine when first dropping into like Sioux Falls.
Yeah.
And so eventually, I think I have had coffee or something with most of the people that I have had
Mhm.
added on Facebook. And coincidentally, my wife I first met on Facebook, and then it led to getting to know
Yeah.
each other a little more, and eventually we got married. So anyway,
Yeah.
we're not getting paid by Facebook to say any of this stuff, by the way. But just saying,
Yeah.
real human interaction, face-to-face interaction is what I want to promote, not necessarily just digital online
Mhm.
interaction, although this podcast will primarily be a digital
Yeah.
connection. But we do live in Sioux Falls. It's pretty easy to get in touch with either of us.
Definitely. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
if you have anything else you want to say, feel free to at any point. I was trying to think, maybe next, like, would you want to share a little bit about like your story? We can go deep, we can go short.
Yeah.
In terms of what you want to share for podcaster listeners to kind of know a
Yeah.
little bit more about who you are, Moses.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I usually start with where I'm from. I'm originally from Eritrea, which is a country on the east side of Africa by the Horn. And I was born there, but when I was 5 years old, there was a civil war going on. So my family moved from there, and we lived in a refugee camp in Ethiopia for about 10 years. And I moved to Sioux Falls in 2010, and I've been living here ever since, and I really love it. And I've gone to high school at Roosevelt and went to USF for college, and I studied media and currently work for Avera as a community outreach consultant, and I run a little nonprofit to support youth in Sioux Falls with my wife Pusida, and that's kind of my background story. But mostly in terms of my faith background, I'm Catholic, and I've grown up in the Catholic Church, and I still go and attend Mass, and I really enjoy going to my church and building the community, because I've been built in that community since I was probably 10, and that's my Catholic foundation, or the foundation of my faith. It's gotten me to be more grounded in my faith and to see the world how Jesus would see it, and but I wouldn't say I was really a Christian until I was really in my lowest point in my life, because probably in 2018, 2019, I was really depressed, and I was really suicidal because of just different life circumstances, and I was taken into a very behavioral health, where I had to be there for about 3 weeks because I couldn't really function and I couldn't do anything. And they would bring different just pastors or chaplains to kind of share the gospel, and there was one where we were where somebody was sharing the gospel, and they read John 3:16, where it says, "For God loved the world that He gave His only Son, and whoever believes in Him would have eternal life." And at that time, I was with all of the patients, and in a kind of mental hospital. There's just so much going on, and nobody's listening, and they're just in their own world. And when that word hit me, I felt like Jesus really died for me. Jesus, in that He wanted me to focus on Him, keep my eyes on Him, and even though Jesus died for the world, that He died for me too. So that's when I really made Jesus my personal Savior and Lord, and that's where I would say I become more relational and more closer to God, and that's how I kind of built my relationships and where my faith really took roots, and everything has become more blessed since then. And I gave all glory and all praise to God. And I wouldn't say like my background in the past, it wasn't all for nothing, but it really gave me root. But when I really accepted Jesus as my personal Savior and Lord, then that's where my story begins, I would say. And I hope that that's this. I will continue to glorify God with my story, and allow Him to work through me to bring His kingdom, and to build those relationships with His people. So, yeah.
Cool. Thank you for sharing that. And I think that's so unique, that each of us has a way that we've been shaped, and so you have like a specific social location, given your history, fleeing military conflict in the form of civil war from your home country, and living in a refugee camp and coming here, and how God has like formed and shaped you through that. But like the gospel is like getting into the nooks and crannies of your life, and redeeming and transforming your story, and even using the parts of your story that have felt broken, and brought pain and heartache, and how Jesus is like helping to make you, as He does for anyone that chooses to follow and surrender Him, but like helping to redeem those aspects of your story, bring healing and wholeness, but also I feel like genuinely take those experiences and use them to help other people.
Yeah.
And that's like what I see you doing at your continued work at Avera, and what you and Pusida do with like for the next generation. Love to have you talk more about that whenever it's most appropriate. But yeah, thank you for sharing that, Moses.
Yeah. And I would say the word is surrender, and I think the main thing when it comes to my personal life crisis, it was just because a lot of the things that I was thinking is just I was thinking that was my identity, my work was my identity, and everything that I was doing was my identity, and my foundation was kind of onto that, But I didn't put my identity as a son of God, as a personal, as Jesus, kind of as His disciple, and that when that foundation of how I was able to work, and to when that foundation became crumbled, then I fell apart. But I have to find a new identity, a new foundation, and that new identity and new foundation was Christ. So that's where I had to surrender everything that I knew, everything that I have brought up into Jesus, and then everything started taking root. So I like that you brought up the word surrender, and when we surrender our past, our feelings, or our pain to Jesus, and allow Him to work through us, then things get better.
That's helpful. Yeah. I think identity is such a big part of that. Yeah, for sure. Cool.
But yeah, would you like to share a little bit about your church background, and kind of your story? And
I'll try to say it in as much of a nutshell. I'm sure for each of us, like we can. There's lots of layers, more layers. I'm sure that we could go into your story as well too, and I'm sure we will. Like that'll be fleshed out in further episodes. For me, born here in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. Went to Parker High School. Graduated from there in 2006. So I'm just a little bit older than most of you by I don't know how many years.
I'm 29 now.
You're 29. Okay. Oh, less than 10. Less than 10. So that's not bad. That's not bad. I got 3 younger brothers that are awesome. Love them. Parents who live out on the farm just west of town here, west of Sioux Falls, and love them to death. Love my whole family. Grateful for them and the upbringing that I've had. It has shaped me and informed me in so many ways that I'm really thankful for. So after graduating from Parker, went up to Lake Area Tech up in Watertown, graduated from there in '09 with an occupational therapy assistant degree, and then spent some time in Indianapolis on a little travel contract, and then I was kind of on my way out to Ohio as Kara and I were getting married, and then plopped down in Northeast Ohio. Worked still in the occupational therapy assistant role for a while, and I grew up, I should backtrack just a tiny bit, grew up here as far as kind of church background experience at Linwood Wesleyan off of 57th, near 57th and Cliff there, and so that was formative for me as well, for sure, absolutely. But spent time maybe in different youth groups, kind of even at a place in a small town called Chancellor, which is, I don't know, if you're from the area you probably know about it, but if not, yeah, it's just a small little town, so spending time in maybe a Baptist church there, going to Awana, and then later on in high school I want to say I got more involved with the youth group there at Linwood, but really didn't have any specific probably identity in terms of, at least when I was growing up in it, of what it meant to be Wesleyan. I'm a little more aware of it now, but yeah, thankful for my Wesleyan brothers and sisters out there. You know who you are, and if it wasn't for actually the Wesleyan denomination, I would not have met my wife Kara, because she went to Indiana Wesleyan University out in Marion, Indiana, and a good friend of mine, Andrew Canan, he got me connected with her through Facebook. Actually, that's how that link became about. So I spent 10 years in Ohio, and just had God did some really powerful things there, and of course, I mean, living life in the mundane, at the time maybe didn't recognize it as being as impactful as it was. Had four kids while we were living out there. Let's see, four kids across from the Football Hall of Fame there in Canton, Ohio. And then we got involved with a church plant out there called Citizens Akron, and that was really formative for me in my life. And right before, just being part of the core team of that was really pivotal for me, as we were kind of with a small group of probably young adults / young families or singles that were really sensing a move of God towards moving into some different parts of different cities, particularly Akron. But we were also part of a network that were, some people moving into Canton, Ohio there, into places and neighborhoods that may be, like I kind of mentioned earlier in the conversation, areas where the prevailing models of church maybe wouldn't readily move into. And we were really supported well, I would say, by our sending church, the North Canton Chapel there, which was just kind of a run-of-the-mill, non-denominational church. And so that was really formative for me to be a part of that core group. And so we moved kind of from the suburb of North Canton into some various neighborhoods in Akron. And everyone has a different comfort level as far as maybe what feeling, what's unsafe or what is maybe uncomfortable. But we, and the group of us that we were with, we wanted to try to stretch our comfort zone a little bit and follow God into places where not necessarily, and having to maybe shed a little bit of probably a savior complex a little bit, like we're bringing Jesus into this neighborhood where Jesus isn't present. So we had to like shed some of that, I really believe, and say like, no, like, God, you've been moving in this neighborhood long before we came. And so at least, I can't say that for most of our Citizens Akron community, but for me personally, that was something to kind of work through, and I think Kara and I both would say that.
Yeah.
But yeah, we really sensed a seed that God was putting in me during our time in Ohio, that the things He was teaching us and just giving us a burden for. And a good friend of mine, Ryan Johnston, who was a pastor there at the time and really discipling us, would always say, like, calling is birthed out of burden. And so I think that's like a piece of the puzzle of trying to figure out what's my calling.
Yeah.
What have I been created to do? And of course there's some, for those that follow Jesus, there's some general ones, like love your neighbor as yourself, the great commandment, love the Lord your God and love your neighbor as yourself, the great commandment, and then the Great Commission, go and make disciples. Those are kind of the two, but even within that, like, how do I, like, God, what gifts have you given me, and how do you want me to, like, give those away and use those for your kingdom in a redeemed way? Not because of, like, power in me, but because of, like, Jesus's work in me doing the work and his power flowing through. So so having just a huge heart for basically, those on the margins, I feel like, in a lot of ways. I mean, in all kinds of levels and ways. People groups that were, unengaged with the gospel on some level, or at least minimally engaged, and also having an increasing burden and desire to see the church dismantle some of the trappings of some kind of race-based systems that were keeping us apart, rather than bringing us together and breaking through some of those systems, whether individually or structurally. And so that was also kind of a part of that Citizens Akron community of what we were trying to figure out and walk in obedience to Jesus. So anyway, that's kind of, and then we dropped into Sioux Falls, and I've been doing a lot of community listening, and I feel like that was a big part of maybe my delay in doing more episodes to the Bridges and Tables podcast. Was I had done some community listening before doing those initial podcast episodes, but I feel like more work needed to be done, and I needed a really good co-host to do it with as well. And so, like, God's been so kind to, like, to just bring about persons of peace in my life, who in which we can resonate on having a common mission that we both sense God has drawn us along into. So.
And not only that, I would say the real work, like I said earlier, is yes, everybody can share. Anybody can share the gospel, or like we have the gift to share, but the real work is doing the work with your family, with your friends, how you live at your work, and that really matters. So, and that's what you've been doing during all this time, and that's really matters, and that's what I'm hoping to emulate and live, and to glorify Christ. And I would say one thing that I wanted to ask, so now kind of you've seen a lot of how God moves and works when you were in Ohio, and he still moves everywhere. He's still in Sioux Falls, and he still works, and we're seeing the evidence too that a lot of people are they're hungry for it, and they want to do the work of Christ, and they want to do so I was like, my question is, now in Sioux Falls, even though there's still the work and there's still churches moving in the right direction, what do you hope to see more? And I know you shared that earlier, but with this podcast and how we will bring those people in, or like what is the vision for this podcast, but also for Sioux Falls.
Thank you for asking that, and I want to hear yours too. And I do want to kind of give a preface in terms of like, I want to speak confidently on the things that I feel passionate about and confident about, but in speaking with conviction, like I pray that it would not come across as arrogant. Like please feel free to reach out, and if there's things that you feel are off, or you have questions about, like, feel free to like please do that, like DM us, reach out if you get my number, or email, or however, like if there's things that I'm open to critique, And I just want to say I'm not above any of that. I know I have plenty of things to learn. But I feel like that there are things that God has specifically, just placed on my heart, and because His Spirit works in each of us as believers, and He speaks to each of us through His Word predominantly, but the language of the Holy Spirit is the Holy Scriptures. And so like we're grounded in them, but then as we look to contextualize that to our modern day, like our modern day context, I think there are some things that God's always doing something. God's always doing a new thing in places, whether a new work in us or a new work in our neighborhoods, in our communities, in our region. I have a sense through the kind of spaces and circles that I've been a part of over the past 10 to 15 years that like God's, and I feel like the pandemic has really accelerated in a lot of ways some of those movements and exposed some things. That God is like calling us into like opening up possibilities for like what are some of the new wineskins that God is calling us to maybe consider. And I'm not saying this is for everybody. Like you have to follow where God is asking you to step into, like wherever that is. Wherever that is. But I do have some like special challenges that I feel like or really invitations. I want to say is maybe more so what it is. That I sense Jesus asking us and His church, I feel like to consider some of these invitations. And some of this is like really influenced by like some different networks and organizations that kind of I've been a part of and have kind of affected like my discipleship, my journey with Jesus. And so like I feel like that there is a ripe opportunity for the church, and if there are people already doing this kind of work that I need to get connected to, push them my way. Shout them out my way. But maybe I just haven't met them yet, and we need to get to know each other more. But I've really been influenced by something called the Christian Community Development Association, and their work on the margins and looking at parts of our community, parts of like any community or city in the world or in our country, but specifically here in Sioux Falls. What are some pockets in our city where there are some people groups or locations where the church isn't as present, and I do sense like a unique call. Again, this isn't for everybody, but I do sense a unique call on the church to like push back against how the American dream has influenced and shaped our idea of what it means to follow Jesus and what the good life is. I'm not saying it's all evil, or that we that everybody has to forego like living in the burbs, the suburbs, or things like that. But I feel like that there are like certain things that I feel like God is calling specific people, and I think it is more people than currently are engaging it. But like how not the American dream and sprinkling a little Jesus on it isn't and should not be the default for Christians overall. Like of course like people in the suburbs they need the gospel too. But I feel like, and I've been in I've heard some different people just I like how they put it, how the suburbs in some ways are set up to create distance from pain and suffering and the hurting. And so like what are the pockets in Sioux Falls where like it's just more visible, the brokenness is more visible, the pain is more visible, and how do we create invitations and spaces for people to maybe reconsider. I mean, prayerfully living in those areas, I think is a major component of being incarnational in the way that Jesus was incarnational. So in in John 1 it talks about the Word became flesh. The Word was God, dwelt with God. The Word became flesh and dwelt among us. another way it's put in a different translation is that like the word meaning Jesus like came and dwelt in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
So like he left like a lofty, spot, sitting on the throne with God, and he's on the throne now, but and always has been. But he left the comfort of that and came as a vulnerable, baby into one of the most marginalized communities in a town called Nazareth. People would say like, what good comes from Nazareth? Like it was looked down upon. It wasn't a space you would want to go or really interact with people or like think that anything significant would come from there. So I guess I have a specific invitation. I feel like for the church to engage some of those places that are less desirable, that maybe don't fit the mold of the American dream, and then also for people to specifically Christians. Like I feel like these are like missional, gospel rooted, kingdom oriented like invitations. And so for people also to like look at what does it look like for me to follow Jesus into relationships that I wouldn't normally engage in. And as Sioux Falls like gets increasingly diverse, I feel like sometimes our tendency, especially for South Dakotans, is to kind of stick around the people that we know who look like us, walk like us, talk like us, believe the same things that we kind of believe, and so on. And some people around me I know do a great job of that, for sure. But yeah, I want to see more of that, I guess. When we were living in, and I think this is a stat, when we were living in Ohio, this was the case too, that there's a stat, I think maybe put out by World Relief or an organization like a refugee resettlement agency, and they would say like there's such a high amount of people who are immigrants or refugees who have never had dinner or like a meal inside of someone who's not a refugee or immigrant, someone who's born and raised in America. And so I don't know if that rings true here. Like you could speak to that a little bit too. But yeah, I think calling us into spaces and places to see kingdom diversity like manifested, not just to get people in a space where we're all singing Kumbaya and we're different. We look different, come from different places, and we're gonna sing Kumbaya together. But how do we get people to like really actually like mesh our lives together to maybe talk about some hard things, but also hear each other's stories and see how people's lives are changed. And I think that's really done through the power of the gospel, like first and foremost at the deepest level. We'll see that in Ephesians 2 if you read through that on the front end. You see the kind of more vertical reconciliation between God and man, and then on the back end you're going to see the horizontal reconciliation that the gospel really provides power for.
Yeah.
So anyway, those are there could be a few more in there. Maybe one more if you. Yeah. I'm sorry, and then I'm going to bounce it back to you. The last one I'll say that's been on my heart and mind a lot has been the priesthood of all believers.
Yeah.
And wanting to see more and more like the demonstration and the manifestation of that, where there is less of a clergy and laity divide, meaning the professionals versus the people who are just kind of passive consumers. Yeah. Which just kind of it's kind of how it's set up anyway. And some people do a great job of, even within that model, just like not being a consumer, but being an activator and like serving and doing the work. But how do we help people maybe shift their paradigm to really be active disciple makers and ministers of the gospel in all of the spaces where we live, work, learn, and play, and help people to like see themselves as like a valuable, super valuable part of the kingdom, and without that work that God has put in them to do, like the kingdom, the church, we're not complete.
Yeah.
So how about you? I know that was a lot, and I felt like I spewed just way too much. I don't even know how much time we're at the moment, but I want to hear like, Moses, what's God put on your heart? What passions, what burdens has He placed in you?
Yeah, I would say in terms of even my personal background, I would say uh, my life has been kind of uh, just with a lot of pain, and in terms of just uh, being born in one of the most one of the most poorest country in the world, and Eritrea is very low even in human rights, and that's why there was a lot of civil wars, and after that we had to kind of go to live in the refugee camp, and I've seen a lot of pain and suffering, and even moving here there was just so much to learn, so much to strive for, and it's been kind of my life, I would say, kind of to go back to what you were saying about the American dream, was to avoid pain and to find comfort and to find a home and to uh, just kind of chase the American dream, I would say, and and even kind of it was, I would say it was hard to separate my life with, like, to see my life without pain or suffering, because even if I'm doing better, then there's my family members, or there's my community members, or even I speak the language Kunama, and I belong to the Kunama ethnic group, and the Kunama people have been in pain for a long time, and they're still suffering back home too. So it was just hard to kind of leave pain or suffering out of my life, you know. And the reason why I'm sharing this is that mostly when we see our world is already broken, and we're still gonna see suffering, we're still gonna see all of this. And Jesus came to this broken world, like you were sharing earlier. He left his peaceful place to come into this broken world, and he did a lot of he did save the world, but the brokenness is still here, you know. The brokenness is still here, and it's not gonna go away until he comes back. But he left us a mission to sit with the brokenhearted, to do his work. And I would say, in terms of what I could do, what I've done through my life, is just because I was moved by this pain to create a better world, or at least to make a difference in my community or in my family. And now where I'm at is just, how can I see this broken world through the lens of the gospel, and how can I be motivated by the gospel, understand the gospel, understand the truth of the gospel, and be moved by it, and to create God's kingdom, or to move God's kingdom forward. So this is where I'm at, and a lot of the work that I have done in my community is just kind of, I see something's wrong and I'm gonna do something about it, you know. But now, how I would say, you know, yes, it is something wrong, but what does Jesus say, or what does Jesus want me to do? How does Jesus want me to operate, and to, you know, share his gospel, share his kingdom, and to move things forward. So this is kind of the starting ground for me to. It's already been, and I've moved with God throughout my life. But how can I do it better with Jesus? Because everything's better with Jesus.
That's really good. That's really good. Yeah, and the topic of pain and suffering, I feel like, is such a that's a sensitive one. That's a deep one.
Yeah,
that's a complex one.
Yeah.
And so the church, I think, you know, like, Jesus is called to come alongside of those. Yeah, mourn with those who mourn, weep with those who weep, and help experience along with them, like, what it means to take ownership in that suffering, in the way that kind of Jesus did, to show them liberation from that, on all the levels, spiritual liberation, but also, like, physical liberation, and on all the levels, mental health, economic, emotional, relational, on all the levels. And so how would you say, like, we don't have a ton scripted. I think we just had like some rough notes we were going off of,
Yeah.
of just like 3 things that we kind of want to hit, but like,
Yeah.
so we didn't prepare a ton for, and not even this question for sure, but I'm just curious, how have you seen Jesus in your life work to redeem some of that pain and heartache that maybe you've experienced? We had to pause for a moment. If you heard some background music over the past 10 or 15 minutes, that was not intentional. I didn't put any of that in the room here, but there were some boys that were coming through
There's
the building
a
here.
music recording studio next door, so.
There you go. So that's what that was. That was not intentionally placed in this recording session by us. Anyway, so as we were just talking, if you want to, feel comfortable, like walking us through a little bit, like how the gospel has been meaningful for you in the midst of healing and processing through that experience of pain, grief, heartache, loss in your life.
And I would say this is a more simpler way, not even simpler way, but kind of going back to my story and how I've come to know Christ and have been built in my faith. Even in the refugee camp, there would be some missionaries that would come, and they would kind of share their passion. They would have a seat at a soccer field, and they would share the movie Passion of Christ. And I remember this is the first time that I've ever heard about Christ, or so I was probably 8, and there was a soccer field, and they were showing us the film, and there was a lot of kids, and this is the first time I've ever heard about Christ. And so we were just watching the film, and it came to the part where Jesus was hanging on the cross, and they were just beating him, or just he was going through all this brutal process of the crucifixion. And at that point, I kind of wanted to know more about this Jesus, and why he was going through all this suffering, and why he wanted to save the world. So I decided to go to church, and just small, we would get together at a friend's houses, and we would just kind of just sing, and I would never know any of the words, or didn't know any of the songs, but I would just be there and hanging out. And eventually that kind of interest led to me joining the Catholic Church, and kind of becoming more involved in the church. And the reason why I started with sharing about Jesus going through suffering, when I was going through suffering too, I had to remember that Jesus already went through suffering, and he took the pains of the world, the pain of this world, the sins of this world on his shoulder, and redeemed the world. And I would sometimes say, no matter how hard life gets, or how much suffering I go through, it will never compare to what Jesus has gone through. So I just find peace in that Jesus has already done everything he could to redeem me, to save me, and that he already won, and that he will come back, and there will be a better world, and we'll get to rest with him, we'll get to glorify him, we'll get to be in his light in the future. So it's the first, just knowing that Jesus has already done it, and Jesus is coming back, and hope of the gospel, and what the gospel provides, and how we can put our faith in him and be guided by him, and help me get through any kind of challenges or suffering, or yeah, just the hope of Jesus Christ.
That's good. That's really good. Has it been something you've noticed, like, that you're able to connect better maybe with kids who share a similar background, whether they're part of the Kunama community or not, other refugees? Like, how has some of the way that pain has shaped your story and the way you've seen Jesus, like, give healing and covering over that? Like, how has that helped you to connect with other kids, or have you seen it? I guess first, have you seen it help you connect?
Yeah, and um, I think I only share this with my wife, and so there's not a lot of people that know about how I'm motivated by Jesus, and or like the things that I do starts with Jesus. And when I was first starting to wanting to work with the kids, I was also going through suffering. I was also going through my mental health struggles and challenges, and I remember that one time I don't know if it's a word from God or it's just my dream, and I heard Jesus say, the word that I was given is, go sweep the streets, or go make the world better, kind of, and make it less kind of bumpy, or like just make it straighter. And it is from the Bible, but the way that I was hearing it is that, like, these places are not safe for kids, so just do what you can to make it better, and that was the word that I was given. Even though I was going through my own challenges, I was kind of called to serve these kids who are going through different challenges, and I think going through those pain helped me understand, like, what they might be going through and how I can be there for them. And I coach soccer, and then I coach soccer and I mentor kids. But coaching soccer, you have big expectations. Like, you wanted to show them like how to get better. You wanted to help them perform, and you have higher expectations. But there are those that are going through so much challenges that they just don't want to do nothing, and that could be in school, that could be at work, that could be in anything,
Like, no vision for their
motivation
future.
for their future. And sometimes you just gotta sit with them and just love them as for who they are, and love them as sons or daughters of God, and just show them that it's okay to feel these things, and that there's gonna be a better future as long as you keep your hopes up and to do the work that you need to do to heal. And sometimes you gotta be the person to kind of lead them, or to guide them through these processes, or to think about these things. So I would say my pain or going through this pain has given me a lot of understanding, a lot of patience, and to be able to work with kids of different background, and to help them, and to challenge them, and to coach and mentor them. And that's just mostly the work that I do with the kids. But I do a lot of that with my work at Avera, and kind of working at a hospital. I see a lot of people suffering and dealing with different challenges too. So going through suffering, as long as you learn to process it and to heal from it, then you will feel more empowered to help others.
That's really good. That's really good. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I can see how that how you're able to be. I think your friend Terry Liggins calls it being a credible messenger, or a credible witness.
Yeah.
And being able to use your story in the way that that certain things have impacted you in a way that, like, I can't say that I have felt any of those things because I haven't experienced those things. That hasn't been my particular social location and experience that I am coming from. So yeah, you have a unique, like, way to connect with kids in a way that other people
Yeah.
don't. And so that's a really cool way to see you surrendering that experience to the person of Jesus, so he can work within your story.
Yeah.
So like you say, like, I love that, sweep the sidewalks or sweep the streets,
Yeah.
make the path straight. I love that. I love
Yeah.
that. Coincidentally, we both work for Avera.
Yeah.
We don't work in the same department.
Mm-hmm.
Avera is not sponsoring this podcast either. I don't think either necessarily, but you're welcome to. I'm just kidding. But yeah, and I work. I didn't really get to what I do on a day-to-day basis. I kind of forgot about that, but I do work for Avera Behavioral Health within kind of that mental health field, which is kind of how still within healthcare, within occupational therapy. I worked in for like 12 years. Moved to mental health, and now I get to work within that setting. And I was not there when you said you spent you had your stay there. But we've seen each other there as coworkers, which has been fun to see. But yeah, it'd be neat to maybe at a future podcast or episode we could have like a standalone conversation on mental health. I think could be helpful. I think. And I'm not a counselor. I'm not a doctor or anything like that. So there's like plenty I don't know, and I will readily admit that. But there's some things that like I've been able to pick up along the way in my work with adolescents and kids, but primarily teenagers. So anyway, and with that, I'm trying to think if we've kind of covered our bases here for this first podcast. Any other things you want to cover?
I think we did for the most part, and at least for the things that we want to discuss as an introduction and kind of share about our passion and the things that we want God to work in our life or in the community. But I think one thing in terms of the podcast, I think we were hoping to have different kind of speakers, or I don't know if you call them speakers.
Guests.
Yeah. And so would you share a little bit of kind of the guests that we want to have and what they can expect when they come to this podcast, or if we reach out to them?
Sure, yeah. I'm sure we'll be reaching out to, we made a long list of different people we'd love to have on at some point here. So guests from a variety of backgrounds that have different, all kinds of expertise in different areas. And I think guests that can help us maybe see where we can uncover the kingdom a little more within the community, maybe gain a vision for partnering in what the Spirit of God is doing here in the city and the region, across people groups. I love at the beginning, as you said, like it's all about relationships. Another quote from one of my friends, Brian, he'd always say like, the economy of God is all about relationships. And so like, we want to steward that. And with some of these guests that we're having on, I think we want to see the areas that they're experts in, or at least they have experience in, and we want to be able to have them share their story, how they see God moving in their life and in their own community, among their own networks and sets of relationships that they're involved with. And it could be people that are, predominantly I think we're going to focus on people that are local here. People that you know, people we both know, or people that I just know. So it could be a mix of all that. And I also think it'd be good to get some people that maybe don't live in Sioux Falls but are doing similar work. Whether they're one state away or a few states away. I think I have some ideas, and I think like predominantly people that are close, that are local. I love there's another, I love I have all these little quotes, and some people might think they get annoying, but like there's this guy, Dan White Jr., he says the future of the church, he believes, is like 4 things that begin with the letter S. Slow, simple, small, and super local.
Oh, wow.
Slow, simple, small, and super local. And so like I do want to focus like predominantly on like people who are here, who we are in relationship with. We can rub shoulders with them. We can celebrate what they're doing. We can hear their story. And not everybody who we interview like has to say that, at least in my mind, like they don't have to say that they follow Jesus necessarily. Like I think there's things we can learn from everybody. Like I think most people probably will be Jesus followers of the way. But like I'm not against at all having some people, who I think could have some really good things to say about ways the Christians or the church could they need to see things maybe from a little different perspective.
Yeah, definitely.
So, I mean, if a donkey can do it to a prophet in the Old Testament, or if I think there's all kinds of ways that the people of God have not always gotten things right.
Yeah.
Jonah, you know, towards Nineveh, his heart towards Nineveh was terrible.
Yeah.
And God still used him. But I feel like, so no matter who it is, like, I think we have some really beautiful and amazing guests that are to come.
Yeah. Yeah. And
what do you think? Yeah, I mean,
no,
speak to that as well. Yeah.
That's definitely perfect. And and it's so, like we said earlier, it's all about relationships, and we hope that it's not just you come to our podcast and you share and you go about your way, but we want to be able to steward our relationships with the people, with the guests, or even like you say, it's local. We want to make it local, and the best way to do that is just to, continue those relationships and the kind of the 4 S's that you were sharing, and I think that's what Jesus did too, and that was it was very effective because we have Christians all over, and it was very small. It was 12 disciples, and it was in a small region, and it's not that we want, like, now Jesus did it in that way, and it was very effective, and we want to be able to do it in the way that Jesus did, and it will it will motivate our, like, people's heart to do to be more Jesus-like, and they will continue their relationships, and the kingdom will keep moving forward. So that's what we want to see, and that's all. Yeah, but I think we can share about our Facebook page and where to follow us, where to find us, and
and I'll try to include as many like people or organizations or churches, nonprofits that we reference in the show notes. So look in the show notes. I'll kind of help put those in there if you want to follow up or kind of just check out some of those things that we've been referencing. And I think like with those 4 S's, like, those are like it's like pictures or values of the upside down kingdom. Like a lot of things in our culture like want us to do everything the opposite of that. If it's big, if it's fast, if it's available anywhere, anytime, it's good. And that's what we're shooting for. But I feel like in the kingdom of God, like we flip the script. And a buddy of mine, Zach Cole, he'll say, like, in kingdom math, things don't make sense. 1 + 1 doesn't always equal 2. Sometimes 1 + 1 equals 3 or 1,000 or 3 million. Like in kingdom math, things don't make sense, and part of that's like what it means to like have faith. Definitely. Not following things that are completely irrational. Like I'm all for using logic and reason, but I think there's for sure an element of like, and everybody has faith in something. But like how when we're putting our faith in something that's good and can be trustworthy, we can make some of those leaps into the unknown. But if you want to give people, you're kind of handling a lot of our social media, and I'm not putting that all on you, but I'll help with that. But you've done a great job of putting that together. I just want to give a shout out to you. So whatever you want to share in regards to that.
So we just created our Facebook page and Instagram page. It's called Bridges and Tables. So we'll share that in the podcast or wherever we share. We will be sharing it on Spotify as well. So just follow us and support our mission, our vision, and reach out to us if you have any questions. And I would say I speak for both of us when I say that we're not trying to reinvent anything. We're just trying to follow Jesus and His ways, and there's a lot of people that are already doing the work, and we commend you for that. And we want to partner up with you guys and to work with you guys and to build those relationships and move God's kingdom forward. So we'll reach out to you guys if you would think that you'll be a good guest, and if you know anybody that could be a good guest too, recommend them to us, and we'll have them on the podcast, and we'll continue those relationships, and God will bless all of us. So,
Yeah. Well, thanks for listening.
Yeah.
Bless up, and we'll catch you on the next one.
Yeah. Thank you.